The new DJI Neo ActiveTrack looks flawless in the promo videos, but what happened when you put it on a real bike, in a real forest, with real obstacles? It recorded a tree crash that wasn't even its own, landed itself on top of a hail bale, and came within centimeters of my face. Let's talk about what ActiveTrack can actually do. Today we're testing the DJI Neo 2's ActiveTrack and obstacle avoidance system on a real bike ride. Hi guys, welcome back to our drone channel. No prepared routes, no controlled lightning, no stage situation. Just open fields, tight forest trails, fast sections, branches everywhere and constantly changing light. We took the drone biking at midday in late afternoon sun and all the way into blue hour. And instead of engineering a perfect test environment, I simply rode and let the Neo 2 deal with whatever came. This is not a stress test designed to make the drone fail, it's a real use case test showing what the Neo 2 gets right and where its limits actually are. If you enjoy real-world drone content without sugarcoating, consider liking the video right now. It helps a lot. And now, let's jump in.
Let's start with the rear tracking, because this is the mode most people rely on when biking. And to keep it fair, we begin in the easiest conditions. Open fields, midday sun and clean visibility. In these first runs, the Neo 2 behaves exactly as you'd want. It locks onto the bike, quickly holds a consistent distance and doesn't drift left or right. Even with small light changes from scattered trees or clouds, the camera and tracking stay stable. This is one of the advantages of the Neo 2's compact design. It's light, it's responsive, and those built-in prop guards make close passes a lot less risky. On the next section, the terrain gets more interesting. A wider forest past small bushes, overhanging branches, sunlight flickering through the trees. This is the kind of environment where larger drones start to wobble or lose their clean line. The Neo 2 though reads the environment well. You'll see a few micro corrections here and there, but it keeps the track without hesitation. Rear tracking is also the most beginner-friendly mode. I had my wife try it with just a quick explanation. No deep menu walkthrough, no practice run, and even in mixed terrain, trees on one side, open field on the other, the Neo 2 followed her reliably. It automatically adjusts its position when the trail gets narrower and it chooses safe angles instead of forcing a cinematic shot. When the speed increases, you start to see the system working harder. Fast curving trails, branches coming in at head height, shadows across the path. But the Neo 2 still holds the track. At one point it gets quite close, but it immediately recovers and extends the distance again. Overall, rear tracking is where the Neo 2 feels most confident. It deals well with light changes, it handles mixed terrain without drama, and it gives you stable, predictable footage without demanding much from the pilot. If you want the safest and most consistent bike tracking mode, this is the one. And before we move on to front tracking, here's something I didn't expect. While I was testing the Neo 2 in rear tracking, I had the Mini 5 Pro in the air as a secondary camera to document the shot. And the Mini 5 Pro ended up in a tree. The Neo 2 kept tracking without any issue, while the M5P had a very real-world moment of its own. No damage, no drama, but definitely not the shot I planned for. Well, I then got her out of that tricky situation. Alright, back to the Neo 2, let's look at front tracking.
Front, follow, 3, 2, 1.
Front tracking is the most dramatic looking mode because the drone's leading the ride instead of following it. You see the rider, the trail behind and the movement through the landscape. It feels fast and personal, and visually it's one of the strongest perspectives the Neo 2 can produce. In wider areas with moderate speed, the Neo 2 does an excellent job. On straight forest roads and open sections, it holds a stable distance, adjusts height smoothly, and reacts quickly to changing light as you move in and out of shadows. Larger drones often struggle here because of their weight and momentum, but the Neo 2's compact size and low mass helps it correct its position much more responsively. But the moment the environment tightens up, you begin to feel the limitation of this mode. When the drone's flying backward, it relies on its rear and side visual sensors to monitor the space behind it. These sensors work well, but they don't deliver the same 3D depth information that the forward-facing LiDAR system provides when the drone's flying forward. So in front tracking, the reaction window is smaller and distance estimation is less precise than in rear tracking. You can see that clearly in this section. The trail curves, the light flickers through the trees, and the drone makes a correction. But it isn't enough to avoid a thin branch behind it. It clips the branch, shakes for a moment, and then stabilizes again before continuing to track me. The important part is that it doesn't drop the track and it doesn't lose control, it recovers instantly. A few moments later, the margin gets even smaller. I increase the speed on a narrow trail, the drone keeps its heading, but as the path bends and the shadow shifts, it doesn't back away fast enough. For a brief second, it comes uncomfortably close to my face, just a few centimeters. It immediately increases distance again, but it's a very real reminder that front tracking in dense forests requires caution. To be fair, this is a physical limit, not a software issue. Any sub 250 gram drone flying backwards through a tunnel of branches will reach the edge of what optical sensors can interpret. What matters is that the Neo 2 maintains tracking, corrects its position, and stays recoverable, even when it touches something. In open terrain or on wider forest paths, front tracking is excellent and produces some of the most engaging shots you can get on a bike. But for tighter trails, higher speeds, or unpredictable branches, rear tracking simply offers a much safer buffer. Side tracking is usually the most cinematic mode. You get motion in the background, a clean view of the rider, and that nice parallax effect when passing trees or objects. And in open terrain, the Neo 2 handles this extremely well. On fields and wider tracks, it holds the side angle with confidence. Even with light shifting between sunlit sections and shadows from trees, the Neo 2 maintains smooth lateral motion. This is where the compact size and low weight again help. The Neo 2 stays locked on the rider and simply slides along. But as soon as you bring the side tracking close to real obstacles, you quickly learn that this is the least forgiving mode. The drone has to balance tracking, lateral movement and obstacle avoidance at the same time, and the reaction window is pretty small. A good example is this sequence along the tree line. The Neo 2 tracks my wife from the side, but as branches and gaps appear, it occasionally switches position automatically. It moves behind her, then back to the side when the environment opens up again. Well, that's not an arrow, it's a drone choosing the safer position instead of forcing the cinematic angle. But then comes the moment that surprised me the most in the entire test. I stay in side tracking on purpose with a row of hay bales on my left. The Neo 2 holds the line perfectly until it gets too tight. And instead of pushing closer to me or risking a collision, it quickly stops and switches mode. But then decides to climb and collides with the bale. Somehow, I guess. That's around 2.5 meters up. From the ground I couldn't even see it. I was pretty nervous because I was afraid the Neo 2 might have fallen between the hay bales. I actually had to use the Mini 5 Pro to locate the Neo 2. Thankfully I found it safe on the top and it was still powered on. Nonetheless, how to get it down? So what I did then was to connect the RC2 controller to the Neo 2 and to fly it down. To be honest, I don't know if this was a crash or a problem with the surface of the hay bale packaging. Probably it was a deliberate safety choice, a conservative one, but a safe one. And honestly, I would rather have the drone park itself than attempt a risky sidestep at the wrong moment. In open field, side tracking on the Neo 2 looks great and works reliably. In mixed terrain, it still does well and adjusts intelligently. But for tight, obstacle-heavy sections, rear tracking remains the safest and most predictable option. Gesture control is honestly one of my favorite features of the Neo 2. Being able to adjust the drone's position without carrying a remote feels incredibly freeing, especially on a bike. It makes the whole experience more natural and a lot more fun. In good light, gesture control works impressively well. Clear hand, simple background, and the Neo 2 reacts almost instantly. Switching from rear to front to side tracking with just a single movement is smooth and intuitive. But here's something important. Both my wife and I tried doing gesture while riding, and that doesn't work reliably. Honestly, that's a good thing. When you're on a bike, your focus should stay on the trail, not on waving your hands around to change drone's position. Gesture control is designed for moments where you stop or slow down briefly. When the bike is moving, you have wind, unstable posture, and shifting shadows. The drone can't get a clean read, and it shouldn't encourage you to take your hands off the handlebar anyway. When my wife takes over later, you clearly see how environmental factors affect recognition. She's wearing half gloves, the late afternoon light is softer, and her white sweater creates strong contrast against the forest background. In that mix, the system becomes less consistent. Sometimes it reacts instantly, sometimes it waits, and occasionally it chooses a different tracking angle than intended. That's not a flaw, it's just the reality of gesture-based control. And when a drone decides to ignore a gesture because the signal isn't clear and instead prioritizes stable tracking, that's absolutely the right behavior. In low light, gesture eventually lose reliability completely. Not because anything breaks, but because the camera simply doesn't have enough contrast left to interpret hand movements correctly. But whenever the conditions are right, good light, visible hands, no gloves, and you're standing still or rolling slowly, gesture control is one of the most enjoyable ways to use the Neo 2. No remote, no controller strapped to the bike, just simple body language and a drone that follows your cues. Low light is where the limits of any small drone become visible. And with a half-inch CMOS sensor and an f2.2 aperture, the Neo 2 is naturally working with less light than a larger camera drone. In the late afternoon, before we even reach true dusk, you can already see the image changing. The sky stays bright, but inside the forest the shadows get deeper, colors soften, and the picture starts to smear slightly. That's completely normal for a sensor this size. In this situation, the Neo 2 is using both its LiDAR and its visual sensors to understand the environment. And for most of this forest corridor, that works well. It flies under several overhanging branches and keeps a clean track, even though the contrast is already reduced. The problem appears when we hit a combination that's difficult even for LiDAR. The moderate light, a very busy background of trunks and leaves, and a thin leaf-covered branch that bends slightly into the trail. The reflected signal from that branch is small and inconsistent, and the camera image is already soft because of the limited light and the half-inch sensor. So together that means the Neo 2's LiDAR and visual system don't get a clean, reliable reading in time. The drone doesn't detect the branch early enough, clips it and goes down. Not because it was completely dark and not because LiDAR doesn't work, but because thin flexible obstacles in patchy forest light are simply at the edge of what this sensor setup can resolve. The important thing is that the Neo 2 was easy to recover and didn't take any damage. But it's a very real reminder that even in late afternoon light, dense forest tunnels can push both LiDAR and visual obstacle sensings to their limit. Once we actually move toward evening, the behavior becomes much more predictable. The image softens further, highlights stay bright, and the rider drops deeper into shadow, exactly what you'd expect from a half-inch sensor. Tracking, though, remains surprisingly solid. On open field paths, during the last minutes of daylight, the Neo 2 keeps following cleanly and avoids the larger obstacles without any issues. But in true low light, the camera simply can't gather enough details to maintain the same level of depth perception. Not because anything breaks, but because physics win once the contrast fades. So the takeaway is simple. Late afternoon forest shadows and real low light are two different challenges. The Neo 2 handles both better than expected, but dense, shadow-heavy forest after the sun dips is not the place for autonomous tracking. In daylight or early evening, though, it's a very capable and reliable companion.
So that's the real-world performance of the DJI Neo 2. Strong tracking in good light, solid obstacle handling in moderate terrain, and predictable limits when the trail gets tight or the light drops. If you know what conditions you're riding in, the Neo 2 can be a reliable companion on a bike ride as long as you stay aware of those limits. If you found this helpful, drop a like, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Tell me what terrain you want to see tested next, and instead of watching the next video YouTube recommends, grab your own drone, head outside and fly, even if the weather is not perfect, because real experience will always teach you more than another video. Thanks for watching, have a good day, switch off, bye bye!